Hi everyone, my name is Dhirendra and I play the role of Yusuf, and we'll just go around this way and introduce ourselves. And I'm not Ugandan and I'm not Ismaili, but I'm an honorary Ugandan because I was born in Tanzania and I was 12 when this happened. And I have very vivid memories. I have been to Uganda. I was 7 years old when I went to Uganda. It's a long story, but we were reuniting with my aunt who was leaving Kenya to emigrate to UK, and we lost the plane connection, so we drove by bus overnight to Iganga, and from there we connected with them and we toured all of Uganda. And I remember it like it was yesterday. Entebbe, Kampala, Jinja, Kakira, seeing hippos for the first time in my life, and Jinja, arriving at the Hindu temple because it was a Sunday and there was some event, and the Indian High Commission at the time was giving a talk there, and going through the gardens and seeing this. So I'm from a poor socialist country. Uganda was like paradise and opulent for us, and I'm walking through and I see this giant statue, and I look up and it's a man who looks like me. I had never seen that before. It was Mr. Madhwani, the richest man in Uganda. Yeah, to see that as a 7-year-old, even then, was really empowering because it was non-existent, So that's enough about me.
Hi folks, I'm Nimet and I played Parin. I was born and raised in Nairobi and came to Canada in '89. My Masi was in Uganda, the Muljis, and they actually ended up in Sweden. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Glenn McDonald. I'm the General Manager and Production Manager for Western Gold Theatre. I'm not from Uganda. I'm actually from Winnipeg, but I remember distinctly when this event happened because history was one of my major subjects in high school, and this affected me greatly.
And if I may interject, Glenn is the person who constructed the set that you see.
Hi everyone, I'm Akshay Patnaik. I grew up in India. I was born in Canada, in Montreal. And I'm also not Ismaili, I'm like Indian. And, it was a huge education for me to sort of, learn about this, and it was an immersive experience to especially be around others that were offering so much I had to steal from.
Hi, I'm Sabrina Villani. I'm from here. My parents are from Tanzania. We're Ismaili. They're from Tanga and Zanzibar. And and I played the role of Shamira.
Oh, I played the role of Nasser. I just forgot to mention that.
And I'm Mubina. I'm from here, and as you can see, I wasn't in the play, and I am from Uganda. My husband's in the audience. We are both from Uganda. And I'm a daughter of an ex-member of parliament from Uganda. And so when all this was happening, brought shivers in both us today. It was a very good play. I'm sorry that Salim is not here today, but it brought a lot of memories, especially that clock. That clock was, we lived by that.
Yeah.
Oh, that.
Yeah.
How many days, and in the beginning, not knowing, we didn't believe it. My husband and I were at his brother's marriage in Jinja in Uganda, and when we heard, we laughed. Oh, another dream. In 2 days, he will change his mind. And from there it went on. Yeah.
Anyone else from Uganda? Go ahead, sir.
I went through the whole scenario.
You went through the whole scenario?
Right from the time the coup took place, the dead bodies, the killing, the disappearances, and finally I left to immigrate to Canada. I was processed by the Canadian authorities in the British High Commission in Kampala.
Wow.
And I got my papers. I had my elderly parents to take care of. My mother's passport was torn in front of me, thrown into the garbage. And I held on to my passport and I was able to leave the country. I had to get my mother a one-way document from the British High Commission to take her to London and apply for a British passport on the strength of my father holding a British passport. Nabina may not remember me, but my father and your father were friends. I'm Jalef Dastur's son.
Oh, of course, of course.
You know my sister Piroj.
Very well.
I knew your father very well.
I was just telling Farah that
And I
our
stayed
best.
in your hotel in Fairways in 1993.
I was just telling Farah that our best teachers were Firoz and Amy.
And you know my mom, Amy, and Lucy.
Oh, you are
Amy's daughter.
Oh, yeah. Nice to see
Nice
you.
to see
Good to see you.
I've met your father many times.
Yeah, well, but you did amazing work in Uganda.
There was only one Dastur in Uganda.
Yeah.
So if anybody talks about Dastur, that's my father and me.
And that's what I'm finding here when you're saying not Ismailis. I don't want you to get the impression that only Ismailis lived in Uganda, for especially people who know. There was, in fact, Ismailis were a minority, as you would say. They were of all groups, and especially the largest was the Hindu community. And as you said, the temple was really big. And so, yeah, I guess the author is Ismaili, and many Ismailis live here, but
I think the biggest minority was us.
yes,
Only 50
Yes.
people.
yes.
Zoroastrian Parsis.
Yes.
But you did a lot in Uganda. The Dasturs did a lot in Uganda, yes. So, yeah, it brings, yeah,
My father
you're,
was an alderman in the city council at one time.
yeah, mine too.
And he was
yeah.
almost eligible to become the mayor of the city, and I discouraged him to do that.
Oh,
Because that was during Obote's time.
that's right.
And I said, if you become a mayor of the city, you'll have to become political. And I said, if you do that, you'll be having a target on your back.
Sadly, my father
And
was
my
political.
father declined to become the mayor of the city.
Yeah, my father was political. He was part of Obote's group, and he was a member of parliament under Obote.
You know, one of our dear friend, Anil
Yes.
Clark, who was a lawyer, he was picked up from his house on Sunday morning by two plainclothes guys. Till today, nobody knows what happened to him. He just disappeared from the face of the earth.
So just before that, that come from my father, and an army person warned him,
Right.
and my dad escaped, and so we thought he had been killed because we got a call he had been killed. And so Anil and my dad were very good friends, and happily my dad escaped, but Anil didn't.
When you spoke about Madhwani, I know the whole Madhwani family, right from the giant Madhwani to the Manubai Madhwani.
Yeah, yeah.
And Manubai Madhwani knew Anil Clark very well, a friend of ours who was being targeted by Anil. And before he was picked up and he was killed, Manubai told Anil, he says, you got a target on your back. Come to my plantation in Jinja. I got a private airstrip. My pilot will fly you out from Uganda into Kenya and you'll be safe. And unlike everybody else, he says, I'm Ugandan. Nothing's going to happen to me. 1 week later, he was dead.
Yeah, as my father was fleeing, he also phoned him, get out.
Yeah.
Because the army said it's me and then you, but he did.
Yeah, that, you know, it's funny you should touch on this about the different Indian sects being together. This is my friend Tarun, who came from Seattle to watch the show. I've just got reunited with him after 45 years, thanks to WhatsApp and COVID. But we are a blessed people of Indian diaspora from East Africa. We knew no Hindu, Muslim, Ismaili, Goan, Catholic.
Yeah.
We didn't know any of that.
That's
You know,
why
we
I'm
were one people, except when India and Pakistan played cricket. Then there was trouble.
But that's why I'm surprised when all of you said I'm not Ismaili. That's
Well, we only,
because of the play.
because of the play, I relate to this story on so many levels. Yusuf is my dad, who's a Tanzanian citizen, who was a Tanzanian
okay.
citizen. He's still alive. Yusuf is my dad. All my mannerisms come from that man who's sitting next to the sewing machine. You know, the way he's sitting. You may have seen some of my posture like that in the play. You know, very self-righteous, very principled. We lived through this story. Ugandans were booted out.
Yeah.
We were nudged out.
But you know, so I'm from, like you, I'm from Tanzania.
And Shiraz too.
Yeah, I was actually on our way, like in the play it says that they didn't want us in Tanzania either. They didn't want us in Kenya. From 60s they were trying to get us out. So the resentment was there, right? we were in London. We met a couple from Kampala who were on vacation. This is July 72. Okay? And because they don't want us, we were coming here, Vancouver. We came here in July 72 and August, we heard in the news that Idi Amin's kicking them out. They were in Kampala on vacation. They were in London and they went back to Kampala only to pack their bags and come back. When we arrived in Vancouver, July 72, there was only 500 Ismailis in Jamaat Khana. And from July to October, we went from 500 to 5,000. Wow. And we saw them, the same couple, in Jamaat Khana in October.
The two of you, you were very quiet. Do you have any input, any question?
Well, I was just interested in this play because I know a few Ismailis who came from Uganda, has gone through that. I've heard a little bit about the stories, but it's interesting to get it in this dramatic way, the little pieces, because it's very hard to talk about when you're going through something like that. So, and I was actually a little bit curious about the Tanzanian experience. There were some references in the play, and what happened in Zanzibar. What was it? What happened?
Imtiaz Bhai?
No, in Zanzibar there was a coup, but what happened in Tanzania is that after independence there was a whole socialist revolution. Even the party was called Chama cha Mapinduzi. It was
Revolutionary Party.
So there was a declaration in Arusha, which was the Ujamaa Declaration, which basically was a land reform program. And we, Asians were petit bourgeois. We were business people. We had businesses, we had properties and things like that. And so the government wanted to take all that away, nationalize it. So, we had businesses, families were taken after. There was no welfare. People would grow up in the family business and everybody was taken care of. All that was threatened.
Our Sunday ritual in my house was we would wake up in the morning and then we'd get jalebis and gantias from the restaurant. Jalebis are these little coils that are like sweet, and then gantias are basically wafers made with chickpea flour. And at lunchtime, my mom would make chicken curry and we'd have this. And then in the evening, we'd go to see a movie. The latest movie on Sunday night from an Odeon or Avalon or Empress, all these cinemas. We would come back at midnight and we'd have a midnight feast with this dry masala chicken that my mother would have made at that time of the night. So there's a reason I'm telling you this story. It was 1971. We came out of the cinema. The newspaper vendors are out on the street back in those days where, the papers came out at 10 o'clock at night. You open the newspaper, there's no news. Every single column in the entire broadsheet is filled with properties that have been nationalized by the government overnight. Yeah, if you had a building, 27 apartments, the unit that you lived in was yours, and you paid rent to the government on that, the rest was all taken by the government, no compensation. So that's what I mean about you were physically booted out, or the Ugandans were physically booted out, we were just gently nudged out with land reform, with caps on foreign currency, like you could not own any foreign currency at all.
That's right.
Right? And then
my mother was taken to prison because we had foreign currency.
Yeah. Shiraz Bhai.
Thank you and congratulations for making this play as well as writing the memoir. I think I've been studying this subject very well, and especially my father came from India to Zanzibar to work on a coconut plantation. So I'm looking at where people came from India to East Africa, because that's my area of research. And there's an excellent book, They Came in Dallas. But I just want to say that as far as this play is concerned, it's a British story, it is Asian story, it is African story. So there are components of it. Of course, the dominant one is Asian one. But I also think there is also a story of how Asians came to Uganda.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely, yeah.
There is a story of but I think also because most of us were born during the British Empire, so we were very loyal to the Queen until today. So
Apa? See
I'm not saying anything bad, I'm saying good things about the Queen. So I'm just saying that it started during that time, and then we changed became Tanzanian citizen, and then So I wanted to say that a lot of Asians left at the time of independence first. That was the first, that was in 1961, right? And before 1961, people like Bill Kinsley, whose father was a big man in Zanzibar, they left it earlier to go and study, and then they stayed. And then there was in Zanzibar the pool, and the name in the, I think a lot of it is referred, Okello came from Uganda. So that's when other Ismailis left, or Asians left. And then the economic revolution in Tanzania, which left. So there has been a series of exodus.
Yeah.
But I think it's a series which I think it's good that a lot of books are written, and hope more plays are written about the stories.
Well,
and like the dominant figure in this play is you. But I hope there are women's stories coming in. Because I think she was there, Nimet was there, very well done, congratulations. But I think a lot of women's stories, because I am very keen on my mother's story, which started when she was very poor, so she was taken to her 3 sisters, and one of them got married to me. And I think their stories are missing.
Well, all stories are missing because we are seen as a monolith, right? Until this day, I have never seen a play about a Ugandan nation or any East African nation anywhere in the world. It's a first. This is a first, okay? And first of many. Give me a second. If it wasn't for my ancestors and your ancestors, Africa would not be the continent it is today. We brought infrastructure to that place. They went and risked their lives and opened those little dukas in those villages. I know people who are still in the remotest parts have shops there. So there's a sense of belonging, right? That is denied to us. The Canadian history, let me just finish and then I'll move on. Canadian history, we hear about now, about the indigenous history, and we hear about the early settler history, the Hudson's Bay Company. Well, we were the Hudson's Bay Company of Africa. There's nothing written about us, right? Today, this event was the largest non-European displacement of people that happened in the history of Canada. There is no history book that talks about this or Komagata Maru. It set the foundations of what is now the refugee policy here in Canada. Right? There is nothing archived in anything other than the Ismaili Museum. There's no archive about this at all. And I think this is where the move has to come. Yes, plays have to be written for different perspectives and gender representation. However, what's most important is that we all need to talk to the school boards, the school governors, and say, the education system, what are we doing about recent Canadian history? Because if this was taken care of, we wouldn't have Pierre Poilievre's, because people would see us as equals to them. My daughter's African. She's adopted from Ethiopia. She goes to school. She's 16. She's frustrated. She said, Papa, they never talk about the fact that Ethiopia was never colonized. She said, they never talk about the Rwandan genocide. They don't talk about the Rohingyas. We just learn about the same thing from elementary school right until now, the same thing, So that's where the fundamental system is, a systemic bias against teaching recent history. That's where the problem starts. But we are coming into our own.
Sorry. Ask about the play.
Sure.
How were you selected, and what was the process you had to go to understand the story of Ugandan Asians? Because I think you did a lot of work to
develop,
make us feel you are Ugandan Asians.
Can I ask, add to that for
Sure.
everyone? So how did you become your character? How did you become Ugandan?
So,
what process? I want to hear from everybody.
yeah, start with Sabrina.
Yeah, so a few years ago, actually, I think this was right before COVID, I read Memoirs of a Mohindi, and I felt like it was really eye-opening. It was even just like cultural things, like, bits and pieces of, even just like the food that's mentioned so much in this play. Like I eat like East African cuisine food, but it's just knowing that it's around the corner, or like who's where and why, right? And I think for me it's been a process, and to me understanding the history of Ismailis in East Africa in general is always going to be a process for me. I feel like I'm always learning something every year where I didn't know. Like a relative will say something like, this happened to me in Kenya, this happened to me in Tanzania, this happened to me in Uganda. I feel like I'm always hearing something new every year, and I've realized I'm like, okay, this is gonna be something I learn about as time goes on, right? Because there's so many stories, right? There's so many different experiences, whether, there's somebody in my family who was 5 when it happened. There was somebody who was 10. And in my family specifically, it was Zanzibar, which is mentioned a lot in this play, right? So even just last year, like I was learning things that I didn't know. And I was like, how did I not know? This has happened to my parents, this happened to my grandparents, right? This happens, and I have uncles who are from Uganda as well, and it's just like, I'm still processing it after a few years, because honestly, it's hard for relatives to talk about it, right? I did a lot of Googling, finding it online, because asking the questions out loud became hard, and there were times where I did have to ask, right? But then, it's also knowing it's a delicate subject for some, right? Like they've been through things or they've had, things happen to them. So it's a process, and I'm still learning. And just to answer the question about how we were, cast. So last year we did a reading on Zoom. This was during COVID. I knew Salim through his daughter Zahida. This is as well, you were mentioning this the other day too. We did a reading for Zahida's play, The Wrong Bashir. And that's how I met Salim, because he was playing the Nana on that role. And then he knew of me through that. And then, now I'm here.
Okay.
I auditioned. I had to audition. A couple of friends just sent me an email saying that, they're looking for brown people. And and so I auditioned. Actually, honestly, like I auditioned with Sabrina and Nimet. It was a pretty memorable audition.
As the reader?
Yeah.
We were the readers. We were the readers.
No, it was pretty dope. Because I walked into the audition room. Melissa, the director, was there, and Tanya was there, and Salim was there on Zoom. So his computer screen was in the middle, and I think Melissa asked me, it's like, do you want them to be off stage and read? I was like, no, come on in, get in with me. And so that was the audition. Shameless, Akshay. I auditioned, and then once the rehearsal process began, and also as I was reading it, I had to learn what it meant to be a smiley, and I realized that I always look at it like a Venn diagram in terms of the creation of the character. There's aspects of my personality and there's aspects of the character's personality that have intersections, right? So, I know what it's like to be a brown person. I know what it's like to be a teenager. I know what it's like to be youthful and light. But at the same time, in the first couple of weeks of rehearsal, I didn't. Because I was absorbing the intensity of the sort of the event and the circumstance, right? So I was so intense, even I didn't want to be around me at that time. And
we had to hit him a couple of times to say, this is a funny play.
This is right? And so he did, and continues to do so. And and then Melissa had a sit down with me. She's like, Akshay, I need you to explore the buoyancy and the lightness of this. And that's when I pitched this idea, be like, okay, so how about I sort of start looking at, with acting and character work, I do a lot of creature work. My process is very physical. And so I said, I'm going to look at some squirrels. And and steal from some squirrels. So that then just brought this sort of lightness, this thing, right? And then Dhirendra took me to the Kilimanjaro Cafe on Kingsway. That's That's when I really learned what it meant to be a smiley. That was a genuine, like, immersive introduction. So yeah, and yeah, so I'm still here, going strong. Yeah.
For me, I was at the right place at the right time, and I'm Ismaili, and I'm of a certain age, and so I fit the bill, and so I got the part. And my process is, we had the coup in Nairobi in 1982, and so I drew from that experience, and of course with my Masi, having been chased out of Uganda and hearing their stories. So information fed my character, information, imagination. I don't have children. I had to imagine, I mean, what is that like when you have children and they're in danger? And you know, what's that like? And you know, and then it's just, I love to observe people. I'm an observer. So I love sitting at cafes and just watching people, and behavior just informs one so much. And so that was my process, was just information, imagination, observation.
Yeah, so I met Salim, as Sabrina pointed out. His daughter is a playwright. Her name is Salim Rahemtulla, and she's written a play called The Wrong Bashir, which is it's a comedy about mistaken identity. And it's going to be produced next year. But we've been workshopping that, so I met him 3 years ago. I was playing him in that play, and he was playing Nana, which is the grandfather. And then I got to know him, and I'm developing a Ugandan project myself, which is set in the UK. And I met with him to have, we invited him to lunch because I knew that a man, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach. So, and I like to cook. So we got together and we started chatting, and I was doing research for the role that I was playing, which is him. And then he said to me, Dhirendra, I'm going to write a play, and you are going to be in it. And I said, sure. And 2 years later, we did the workshop for this play, which was last year. And here I am, by the magic of the universe. I feel extremely privileged to play the role of Yusuf, because in the 37 years of my career, I have never had a chance to play the diaspora that I come from. Story of my people. I feel seen in this play. I feel heard in this play. You know, I get goosebumps just talking about it.
There's no cab drivers in this show.
Yeah.
Nimet, you helped me understand my mom and what she was going through during that displacement. That was so, thank you for that.
Mr. Dastur had his hand up, so.
No, I did.
Oh, earlier you didn't? Oh, okay.
I think
Sorry.
Tarun had his hand up.
Oh, okay.
I just wanted to say thank you so much to all of you. I'm a Kenyan-born Parsi, and my family left quite a long time before a lot of the difficulties started. And so I've been here in Vancouver since I was 3 years old. And I've incessantly discussed these topics with my family. I recently went back to Kenya, and none of my family had ever been back to Kenya. There was all this fear of potential violence, of potential friction between us as South Asians and people of African heritage. And when I went there, I talked a lot with people. Well, what are the relationships like now between us and you? And because I really don't try to do this. I do not try to pass for not being South Asian. But I had a conversation with somebody who didn't think I was South Asian.
Yeah.
And he told me, quite honestly, that there's still a lot of tension. And so I think these are really modern tensions. They haven't gone away. And Uganda, in some way, had a big explosion. It was really obvious. Some went back to Jinja. When I went to Uganda, I heard that some South Asians were invited back to Uganda because Jinja, in particular, had a huge problem with the economy. The economy plummeted. But Kenya never had that actual rupture. So the tension just continues to bubble. You know, there are different ways in which these things play out in the East African context. And so I feel, and this is something I've done a lot with my Kenyan colleagues and friends who are African heritage, is I wanted to have the hard discussions. I feel like that's what we absolutely need to do. We need to heal these rifts between us. What is it about us as South Asians that makes us predisposed to treating African people? Not all of us did this, but some of us did treat African people badly.
Yeah.
What is it about us that happens in those situations? That is what I really want to get at, and I want us to heal that rift so that we can move past these things. I feel like the dialogue has to happen.
Well, it started, to be fair,
Yeah.
it started with us being kept separate, right? It was white people, Asians, and African, and it started with us being separate. And so we've never really been together, and then we have stayed separate, but it wasn't really the way we were. But that was, we went to Asian schools, we went to, and we didn't associate with each other. And so it started that way. And some people like my father, people who know him, we were very integrated, but that was unusual. And in fact, he was elected by African people, not by Asians.
Wow.
But I think it was something, it was, within us. Like here, when we come, we don't think we may have those, of course it's inbred, but we are given the opportunity to mix with everybody. And now a little bit in Kenya and Uganda, but it's the way it was structured, and we have not been able to break through that structure.
Tarun?
A few comments and observations. First of all, I agree the intensity of what you guys did in play and writing, it was just amazing. I applaud you guys for an amazing thing. But as watching it, I was thinking about how applicable this thing is. It was, I was a visitor in Africa. I was his high school, we were high school buddies, and I was there only for 3 years as the son of a diplomat. But this was applicable probably to my parents who left Pakistan and went to India. It's probably applicable today. If you think about the refugees and what they go through today, that was the intensity. I was like, this is probably what's happening in so many places today, not 50 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think that's what was amazing. On the, I also loved, it was subtle, and I think you brought it up about the mixture of cultures or not. It was subtle, the reverse racism of the boyfriend, the African boyfriend.
Yeah.
And I think, and then my observation when I lived in Africa, that all the wealth was concentrated in the Asian community, or a lot of the wealth was concentrated.
For sure.
And the failure of mixture of these cultures. In the U.S. and in Canada, there's a lot of intermingling, and I found even today in Africa, one of my best friends still lives in Arusha, and he's been there his family's been there for over 100 years, but no one's ever married across. And so to me, those are things, I don't have an answer to them, but I think that they're subtle in the story that you guys told.
Well, it was important that that component was included in the story. It was extremely important because we were not perfect, and we still are not. I have a friend who just went back after 50 years to Uganda, and he had a very positive experience overall. And I get people coming here telling me that when they arrive at the airport, they said, welcome back. But the tensions are mounting because we still control the economy, and we still refuse to mingle, and we still have our little, secluded communities. And now there's an influx of Chinese folks, and Indian folks from India in Uganda, and in Tanzania, and in Kenya. And that is adding, another complex layer to it all. Young lady here.
Yes. Hi, my name is Mira. This wonderful man is my uncle. I want to thank everyone in this room, and particularly the producers and Mobina and her family, for I just want to say thank you for this is a historic moment. This is a historic conversation for this silence to be broken, and I want to bring up specifically the silence around the trauma, the intergenerational trauma. And I feel very strongly the presence of my mother in the room. So my mother taught at the Aga Khan school, and I'm ashamed to say I don't know if she taught in Kampala or Nairobi. My mother's from Kampala.
She taught in Kampala.
In
She was my
Kampala.
teacher.
Oh my gosh.
And she taught drama. So I feel my mother is actually here with us.
Oh my
As beloved teacher of the Aga Khan school, I've heard all this, like you were sharing. You hear stories, but we've never talked about this. And actually, even the stories, you're just hearing little wisps. They're like whispers. And what you said, the story of my people, and I'm a dancer, so I'm carrying on from my mother's tradition. But my mother worked with students all over the world. She did a Shakespearean production with the African students, where she had the students translate a work of Shakespeare into Kikuyu, I believe it was, and present it in full tribal regalia.
Wow.
That was in Kenya.
Wow.
She's worked with First Nations communities here and presented dramatic myth and story. And I'm working with First Nations communities here to do a combination of Indigenous and Indians and Indians.
Nice.
So dancing to decolonize.
Yes.
But I want to just say that these are the traumas we're carrying from generations of being displaced as peoples, and it is an absolutely historic moment for me and my uncle to have this conversation today, from my cousin Farhad, from my beautiful friend Farhad, from all of you in the room. I just honor you. I just really want to hold up my hands and say thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. This gentleman had his hand up first. I have to soon draw close to this because we have a second show. And we also, need our break according to, human rights laws and all that kind of stuff. So 2 more comments, one from this gentleman and that gentleman over there.
I went to the African High School in Nairobi, where we had a Parsi teacher, English.
That's my mom. That's what I was thinking.
That's incredible.
Oh my gosh.
Wow.
So it was in Kiswahili that you
Oh,
stayed.
sorry. Okay, Kiswahili.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
That was the curtain opener.
Oh my gosh. Wow. Wow.
I still have the program.
Oh my
Isn't it a good job we do this Talkback today?
Helped bring out the integration, the attempted integration, but it was a very important moment. About the play, which was tremendous, I really wanted to comment on the issue of the play mentioned death and birth. It mentioned that my children were born in this country, and the death. I study diaspora and migration too, and those 2 markers are very, very important in terms of the settlement of a people in a country, and so the reluctance, the ties that one has with a country are symbolized in that you buried your parents and your ancestors in that country, in that land, on that earth. Secondly, in Canada, if we were to think about settling in this country, and we've already buried our parents here, or grandparents, and our children have been born here, that's what creates perhaps the strongest ties. So I found that reflected very, very strongly in the play. And thirdly, in my family, I had an aunt, a maternal aunt, who was in Uganda. They happened to be in Kenya at the time of this occurrence, and they were wondering whether to go back. So the indecision was so clear, and it came out so well, what to do, not knowing information, knowing whether the dream would sort of pass, be replaced by another dream and all that. Their daughter, when they finally went back to
Uganda,
I think they were in, I forget the name of the little town.
Barara. Their daughter disappeared because she was meeting secretly with her boyfriend. And they had to leave without her.
Oh my gosh.
Finally, they all ended up in Vancouver, but I could feel that.
Wow.
For a first play, he's done a tremendous job. Tremendous job. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Farhad Dastur. That's my father, my first cousin, my good friend Farah. I just had some observations and some questions. First of all, amazing performance, electrifying. I was born in Kampala. I was 3 years old when I came here, and we arrived from Broughton. And I mean, you could throw a stone, right? And I think dozens and dozens of the Ugandan immigrants came through that one building, which is the Casabella building that's still there. Amy was also, very close to me. She's the reason I became a teacher. This gentleman said she taught him as well. So she passed away last year. It's her 1-year anniversary, September 29th. Her father from Kenya passed away last week. So there's a lot of memories, there's a lot of dream-like imagination that is surfaced by everything that has been brought into manifestation today. I did have a question that connected to some of the political observations. So there was one representation, which was Mississippi Masala, Mira Nairstone.
Yes.
The screenwriter was a Parsi, right? Sunitara Puravala. That had a depiction of the Black African or Black African American. But also there was scenes, flashback scenes of the main character who resembled you in many ways, and him having conversations in Kampala, which I then stole those scenes and I put them in my film, Uganda 1972, The South Asian Expulsion, which was the only other representation that's out there because it wasn't there, so I made it, right? Just a 10-minute documentary where I interviewed my father, my mother, and my sister because I'm too young to have all of those experiences. But you didn't include any Black Africans in your play. Why not?
So, you're the second person from the audience that has mentioned this. And when we did the read-through, I actually said that in the first week of the read-through rehearsal. I said, wouldn't it be great if Munir was played by a Black African? He's still be any smiley character, but could be, and we could.
They are, by the way, they are Black Smileys.
I know.
My tata is one of them.
Yeah, but the point was that he would. Yes, I know, and I know some from Kenya. So we did talk about that, but it was a decision that's beyond, my pay grade. So really, it's a decision that had to be made by the director, the writer. But that was my original intent, saying, we talk about Black people. Okello is my employee. The funny thing is, I leave the store, although Okello knows everything and he's been there before, I leave the store in the hands of Shokat. If I were going on holiday, I wouldn't even leave it for Okello to run it, right? So there are all these subtle things that we talk about, and I felt that we should have had an African actor in the company, but it's, as I say, it's
potentially her boyfriend.
Yeah. But there are budget constraints. Theater is very different from film and television. There are budget constraints. A cast of us, we're not doing Shakespeare, we're not Bard on the Beach, we're not the Stanley Theatre Alliance, which have subscribers. Small companies have small, very, very small budgets, right? So they have to craft it in such a way that you can't have too many characters, otherwise the play never gets done. I know that because I've written a play about 8 brown people, set in the 90s who are completely anti everything that you see of brown people on stage. Never got done.
It's a hard sell.
Yeah. So there are so many complex layers, but the sentiment is there, the commitment is there, and I think if it gets developed into something else, then inshallah, as they say in Pakistan Airlines, inshallah we will get to Kampala. And you go, no, inshallah, I'm flying.
And I just want to piggyback on that just to say that the voice on the radio is authentically African.
Yes.
Yeah.
I actually
made sure,
I actually wanted a Ugandan fellow I met quite by accident. He works for City of Burnaby he's 68. He was a runner. He went from Uganda to Tanzania, then ended up going back to Uganda, and then going to Kenya, and then finally came here. And I met him at a recreation center and he's a coach, you know, for training. And I talked to him, and myself and the producer of the documentary, we both went to talk to him, and he said, "Brother, I cannot bring myself to talk about this." He said, "It hurts me. It hurts me," you know. And he said, like, it's very complex, but he could not. I wanted him to do the voice. So the next best thing is I found a Tanzanian whose kid went to my wife is my wife is an early childhood educator, and this little boy goes to that child care center, and I met this young man through that, and he's an African Tanzanian, and that's his voice that you hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The employee in Mississippi Musala was also Okelo.
Yes.
Oh.
That's right. It's like the common name, right? It's like Mahmood.
Thank you,
Okay,
folks.
any final thoughts? We have to draw to a close, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming down.
Thank you, Mubina.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Jaffer.